Um, each of our alums, you can kind of get a sense of some of the students in the room. And we'd love to just offer first a quick opportunity for our alums to introduce themselves. So we'd love to hear specifically your name, your pronouns, what you studied at Mac, kind of where you are currently, and a little bit about your path to where you are currently. And you can choose whether, go back in time or go forward in time. And we're hoping that that can be about 1 to 2 minutes. We know that that could be a rich conversation and deserves that. And we'll ask for just a quick introduction. So I'm going to invite Özlem to go first, if you would.
Sure, of course. Hello, everyone. This is Özlem, and I'm a 1994 grad. And I came to Mac as an international student from Turkey. And let's see, I first declared my major in anthropology, which I heard about it during orientation, and I fell in love with one of the professors, and he agreed to host me as an international student. But then, and this is Dr. Cambridge, you could fill in the econ part of it. My compadres from Turkey said, "What are you going to do with an anthropology major? You'll be unemployed when you go back to Turkey. Don't do anthropology." So much, in hindsight 2020, I changed my major to econ, and we can talk about that. And so I graduated with double majors in economics and international studies. And currently I work for Minnesota Department of Corrections. I'm the state director of education, and we can talk more about that. But my first career was in the corporate sector. As an international student, you may know this, you get 1 year of practical training. And I used my practical training in the IT sector, which was really booming at the time. And then eventually I realized I don't want to be a CEO of a company. I want to be a CEO of a university. So that's when I took my career in the direction of academia and higher education. Got to start at college at where Carrie and I apparently didn't overlap, but we're at Eastern Illinois University, which is a public university in Illinois. And then this opportunity in Minnesota came up, and got to move back home to Minnesota, which I couldn't be happier about. So we moved back December of last year. So that's my quick introduction.
Great, thank you. Richard, would you like to go next? And then we'll have ML go after you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I feel honored. I'm a member of the alumni board, so my contacts with Macalester have increased in the last year. I graduated from Macalester in 1970. And I came to Macalester, like Özlem, as a foreign student. And I came with the idea that I would do a degree in economics and go back to my country and become the prime minister. Well, of course, it didn't work out that way. Met a fabulous professors, and they took me under their wings and introduced me to a broader concept of economics, which involved politics, where I could channel a lot of my energy. I was the head of the Black Liberation Affairs Committee at Macalester. That was during the time of civil rights agitation, anti-war, and so forth. But the two professors that influenced me, one was Hubert Humphrey. He had come to Macalester College after losing the elections against Richard Nixon. And he took an interest in me. And I think my career after that was very much influenced by a lot of what he did for me. In addition, there was a guy by the name of Theodore Mitau. He, the first class that I took with him, I knew I had to go in that area. He did a class called Modern Isms. I think it was a requirement for all students, freshmen. And I never looked back, mixing the two, economics and politics. I ended up spending 40 years at the World Bank. and interspersed with in and out of universities. I had a stint at Harvard and a short stint at Stanford. The bank allows you to do that type of thing. And then I retired actually about 10 years ago, and then taught at a couple of universities here in Washington, DC. And it's very interesting. Özlem is very interested in working in the system, working with adults. I ended up doing a lot of training of World Bank people, all of whom had the PhDs and what have you. But teaching adults, and it's just a more exciting, it challenges a lot of different things. And that contrasted with my start in Guyana, where I grew up, teaching basically illiterate people, not in formal schools, very informal education, but that's a different story. So I just wanted to say my journey to education and training has been an interesting arc. And we can talk more about that and why I got in what I got into. Thank you.
Thanks. Go for it, ML.
Okay. Hey, I'm ML. I'm class of 18. I am the youngest one here. And when I worked in career exploration as an undergrad, and what I liked is whenever we had alumni panels with it like this, right, there would tend to be a range of alumni in terms of both experience and, like how recently they graduated. And so I always found there was value to be taken from that mix, right? Like who was ready and who wasn't. By the way, if you hear someone talking, I'm in school, I'm in a classroom. There's another teacher like in my grad program taking her night class in the same room I'm doing this panel. So we're both talking and it's fine. You can't really hear. So with that said, hello. So I graduated in 2018. So I've been out of Macalester for almost as long as I was in it, which is weird. And this is my first year teaching. I am a teacher of record. I am a high school English teacher, a 9th grade teacher at Thurgood Marshall Academy in Southeast Washington, DC. And it has been a trial by fire, which I'm happy to talk about. And I am like literally right before this, I was like power napping in the library after kids left office hours. Like I'm so tired, but some things to talk about. I majored in English Lit. I took one education course. I kind of discovered it late in undergrad. I have actually been surprised by the number of friends I had who really didn't study education at Mac, who like turned to teaching. So you can really come at it from a lot of different places, and field experience is really the most important. I did a lot of stuff through Mac that helped me to do that. I did the Breakthrough Collaborative. I did, which I can talk about. I did AmeriCorps after I graduated. And yeah, now I'm on my second year of my master's at Johns Hopkins through, it's in secondary literacy education and special ed. And I'm trying to decide, I hope to be a career teacher. Right now, I think the teaching profession in the US is like pretty unsustainable. But I also think that there is hope to be found. So happy to talk about any of that and answer any questions about any of that.
Whew. Each of you brought in so much wisdom already, and I want to make sure students, your voices are in this conversation. So I'm going to ask one question to kick us off. And panelists, please, we love to hear all of your voices, and don't feel obligated if you feel like points were covered really well. That just allows us to get to more questions. That's always a balance in these panels, right? But I'll kick us off, and students either use your raise your hand function because you are all well versed in the Zoom life, or just feel free to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. You can also direct message Carrie or myself if you'd rather us ask the question, totally fine too. There's so many threads I'd love to pull on from your conversations, but it seems like fieldwork or like teaching experience was and is really embedded in a lot of your journeys. I'd love for you to talk about maybe your first experience teaching, and when you knew like, this is something I want to explore further. I'd love, yeah, whomever would like to kick us off.
If you don't mind, ML, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I can do, yeah, whatever works. It sounds like you're ready, Richard, so go ahead.
Okay. This is an experience, my first real teaching experience was in Guyana. And I taught at a very exclusive high school that was run by the British. It was the elite institution in the country. I think like Roberts in Turkey, in Istanbul. Everybody knows.
No,
everybody.
they're the second best. I went to the best.
I worked with some of your colleagues from Roberts, so they always told me that was the place. But there were a couple of things that really got me involved, not only because the school was exclusive and all the prime ministers and presidents went there, but there was a prestige in Guyana about teaching. Teachers had a special place in the society. We were a colonial society. There was not a lot of wealth. Poverty was all around, but teachers had a special place. And I was a student a year before I went back to teach. So I was actually teaching Latin. Latin was one of the languages I taught, economics and history, because I had passed what was called the advanced level. The Oxford and Cambridge University used to administer exams in the colonies. And if you passed those exams, you went to those universities. But the thing that I wanted to share was that it was a job that elevated me. I felt, I was 18, I just passed those exams and I went back and my status in the community changed because I was teaching at that college and I was a teacher. My credentials I did not have a degree. My credentials was the advanced level certificates from Oxford and Cambridge universities. So what I want to pass on is that there's something about your initial experience that stays with you. How you are seen in the classroom, how people react to you. It's something that has kept me going for my entire career, whether it's in a classroom or elsewhere. Just wanted to share that. And by the way, ML, my wife, my spouse of 50 years, was at Macalester, was an English major, went into education and teaching, did the practical experience and all that. So I just want to share that with you.
Love to hear it. Yeah, I feel there's so many English majors who went on to teach that I noticed back when I worked at Career Exploration, like going through the alumni records. And it looks like they're about to do vacuuming in this room. So I'm probably gonna head out and come back to you for the next question. I'll be right back.
I'll go with the teaching part of it. So I was that nerdy kid I went to an American high school in Turkey, and I was that nerdy kid in the yearbook. It said most likely to come back as the principal of the high school. So I can't tell you when I first got that bug. So I can't, literally, there's no point in my history where I didn't want to be teaching or being in that environment. So I can't tell you that. And so a very long story short, I realized through teaching and whatnot that my passion and maybe my skill set is not in the classroom, right? I don't enjoy it. I mean, I hate to say this is about teaching, right? But this is also education careers in general. It doesn't energize me. It leaves me pretty actually, it saps my energy, and I don't know why it is. Maybe it's because I'm such, I don't know, maybe it's the empathy level. I want to help everyone and I realize I can't help everyone. And also my temperament is such that I want to change the structure rather than trying to save every single person one by one. And more power to those of you who do want to work with individuals one-on-one, but it just doesn't satisfy me. I don't know. That's the best I can explain it. So I found myself actually in higher education administration, but having been tenured, and we can talk about what tenure means if you're not familiar with that. Like, so I am a tenured full professor, right? So I did work through that. I earned my chops, right? So I have the status, if you will, of having been accepted for my scholarship as a scholar among the faculty, which means a lot in higher education. They're very status conscious, extremely status conscious. So I did all that, but honestly, I wasn't doing it for the right reason other than I wanted to get into administration eventually. So that's where my career took me. Some of it was planned, some of it wasn't planned, but I would say my first real teaching job this is when I was in the corporate sector working for IBM. And just on a lark, I said, I've always wanted to teach. Let me be an adjunct at a community college. I loved it. I loved working at a community college, but I didn't love the status. Like, status is a big theme, right, in education, whether we like it or not. And in hindsight, if I had had the courage, and I think it is courage, I think that's the right word, I really should have stayed in a community college setting and continued my career in that direction, because the population that community colleges serve are very near and dear to me. And then now that I'm in the Department of Corrections and working with a very vulnerable population, I feel like I've come home. And I love the population I'm working with. And I'll just share this. One of my dear friends, he's actually a college president at a small liberal arts institution. He says what sets apart his college is that they're not in the business of polishing pearls, but they're in the business of finding pearls. And it's the rare institution who does that. And so I feel like that's also part of the story at Department of Corrections, is we're really trying to find the pearls in a group that most of society has written off as, you fill in the blanks. So anyway, just wanted to share that I have tried teaching, but my career is really not in teaching end of education, but it's in the administration and policy end of education.
Thank you, Özlem. There's so much there. And we got a nice tour of ML's school too, a walking tour as they were walking. Students, feel free to ask questions. I heard in some of your responses this like grace and permission to not like certain teaching ages, or like, being in this direct, like, I'd love for you to talk about like, how did you do that discernment of like, I can teach with folks with verbal expression of that age group, or I'd love for you to just tell us about those ways of discernment once you were like, I love this part of instruction, but these, not my jam, these for sure. I'd love for any of you to take that.
Let me,
Go for it.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. It's okay. Okay, so hi. I'll kind of like try and like weave the last question into that too. So I did, so I realized that I was interested in teaching, which I would never have said at any point in my own K-12 experience. I thought about K-12 about midway through college when I was thinking about like scholarship and whether or not I wanted to do something in the world of, humanities scholarship, which I was not cut out for. That was not really me. I've never been somebody, I like a good survey. Like I've never been somebody that can like deeply focus on one very niche topic. And so then I kind of was doing like all this like tutoring and teaching stuff, thinking it would also like kind of help me prepare for that. And then I did something called the Breakthrough Collaborative, which I'm sure they knock on your doors every year and like annoy you on Handshake if you are into that stuff. It honestly changed my life. I did the New York program. They pick these like amazing children, and the children are kids who are, generally are, they might go to middle schools that are not so hot. They're dealing with what's, like what we call the summer slide. They're like, they're experiencing learning loss over the summer. And this program kind of helps like fill the gap, and they use college students to do it and train them to teach. They really invest in the students they train to teach. It is a great, 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 like window into what teaching is like in terms of the demand and just all that goes with it. And I loved these rising ninth graders. And I was like amazed by how like in love with them I was and how much I loved the job. I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I so excited to like say good morning to 14-year-olds? And then it's weird. It's like a bug that bites you. Some people know they want to teach when they're like 5. I was not one of those people. They're like, I used to line up my dolls, not me. I wish one of those people was there, but it isn't me. So anyway, knowing that, right? Like for me, it was always secondary. It was always secondary education. I always knew because my area is English. Like media literacy is important to me. I love the humanities. I love the like seminar style discussions. I think in another life, if I was like forced to work with much younger kids, I could do it. I find that to be much more difficult. There are many discrete skills that, in my opinion, you really have to explicitly teach, like how to open a marker, how to sit in a seat, how to, and there's a lot of self-regulation stuff. You have to do that with ninth graders too, which I have. They're kind of like big middle schoolers, but it's not the same. So I kind of knew like developmentally that was right for me. Middle and high school, middle school can be a challenge there. I worked in schools for a couple of years before I like committed to teaching, and I just to kind of get my feet wet, which I recommend. Like, teaching is very hard. Do not throw yourself into it unless you are really, really, really sure. Cause your 20s only happen once. Like don't, but it was really good to, it was good to have that time to kind of test out. I worked with middle and high school and kind of figured out what worked and what didn't. And so in that time, I really learned a lot about what worked, but I'm really happy with 6 through 12. I'm trying ninth. It's my first year with ninth. Ninth is really hard, especially post-pandemic ninth, because they are learning how to be in high school. And that is actually a massive transition that even when we're in high school, we may not realize developmentally, huge transition. And so some of the behaviors, I've experienced some really, really rough behaviors this year that I did not think I would. And it really threw me off. And the kids could see I was thrown off. And that's something kids should never see, because they will, they'll go in for the kill. So I've spent a lot of the year like undoing my first year of teaching mistakes in that way, right? Of like, okay, I have to go really hard on calling parents now. I have to like, reward kids for doing really basic stuff, like all this stuff you have to figure out how to do. And so I don't know yet if I have a sweet spot for age, but I really want to stick with ninth and see if I can get better. Because there's some stuff I really like about them. And I've loved ninth graders at previous schools, just like their eagerness, they're like intellectually curious, they're aware, but they're also, like they don't have a lot of the answers and they know that they're not super savvy. So they can kind of like get stuff from you. They're willing to take from you, which is great.
I would like to pick up on something that Özlem mentioned about the distinction between working with a system, bringing change to the system as opposed to the classroom training. My journey, of course, was not from classroom to the World Bank. I was a student, I did my doctorate and all that. But when I got to the World Bank, you can be a macroeconomist, you can work on countries, or you can choose to work on sectors. Most countries organize themselves around ministries, and I found myself drawn to education. We have a big infrastructure, the World Bank lending billions of dollars every year to help. So I started working there, primarily in Africa and Asia. And I have to say, my kids were going to American schools. And it was a difference of night and day. I mean, we're talking all the grades, the materials that you have in class. This is just non-existent in other parts of the world. So what do you bring other than money to a country that the World Bank wants to support? And one has to be humble immediately that the fact that your children and your family, your spouse are going to American schools washed with, even if it's in a city, I don't know quite the situation there, that educational development in other parts of the world is just a completely different animal, and that you can't approach it necessarily only by looking at education. If the child is hungry, then you've got to deal with nutritional issues. If the child is sick and there's a lot of morbidity in the family, you have to deal with health. If there's transport issues and the kid can't get from here to there safely, you have to deal with that. And so this multi-sectoral, integrated, trying to do too many things, but you can't do some things, made it very stimulating for close to 40 years. I mean, I've worked on other things, but that is the point that I wanted to make. You can bring money to some of these issues of education, but that's really doesn't end up solving. And when countries have weaker systems, you could see the money going. You know, I have worked on educating illiterate women in slums in India, to building universities or helping governments build universities in other parts of the world. So many things come into place. And that's part of the excitement that I think Özlem mentioned, that yes, you want to influence what's happening in that classroom, but you think you can have a bigger impact when you do that. Last quick story. I was in a country and I had a chat with somebody from the Ford Foundation. And he said, you know, Richard, I can influence education outcomes with $500,000 in this country than you can do with 500 million. How is that possible? What are you talking about? I'm going to build all the schools and we're going to give them all the bric-a-brac. But that's when I started to learn about this thing called education and training, vocational training, looked down upon by many people, but it's the avenue for some segments of some societies to grow and get opportunity. They all can go to university or some smarty pants shoes university. So I just want to say I share that idea also, that feeling that how can we influence the system as a whole? Yeah.
May I, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, may I just share a reflection too? I mean, Richard, to follow up on what you just shared, there's this idea of humility too, right? I think in the US, we tend to be a little bit uppity about the values we hold. For instance, liberal arts reign supreme. I tell you, as an international student at Macalester, I never, and maybe Macalester has changed since I have graduated. There was never a single discussion about what the heck liberal arts, the phrase liberal arts means. And as an international student who came out of a system where you declare your major before you get to the university and you're placed into it, and you spend the next 4 years exclusively almost taking the same subject, and you graduate with a sense of mastery that no liberal arts will ever give you. So I actually, believe it or not, I mean, it's a joke now, but I went through 4 years at Macalester doubting the quality of my education because I thought, wait, I'm going to take 8 classes and they're going to call me an econ major. Where does that come from, right? And nobody once ever said at Macalester, oh, by the way, here's the value of it and here are the transferable skills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Same with first generation, right? That's the new going phrase in education now. Let's talk about first generation. I came from a family, by definition, on first generation, but the amount of support my family who hasn't gone to college has given me will put any family where the parents have gone to college to shame, and I get emotional about that. So when we just glom onto some of these phrases in the US education system, we completely forget about the merit that other systems might have to bring and the values. And I do wonder, like, when we keep putting this label on our students now saying you're first generation, what is that doing to them psychologically? So I guess maybe it's more of an invitation to also, when you enter education, to question the dogmas and even be able to say these are dogmas. Liberal arts does not reign supreme. First generation is not a universal construct. So that would be my encouragement to you too, is if you're picking a career in education based on some of these catchphrases that may not be around in 20 years, you'll be in for a long haul of disappointment, if nothing else.
But you know, that perspective, you would be fantastic in a classroom. You know, absolutely blow students away, because to me, that's the essence of teaching. You know, one of the things that happened when I started, you know, I was in a British colony. The books that we used said, you know, there's snow, and if you go to Whitehall and all, we had no snow in Guyana. Nobody knew what snow was all about, but we read those books. And one of the things that I was able to do, I think, was to make it more local, make it more relevant. And I completely agree that when you bring this other experience into the classroom, sometimes it opens up to students. Here's an example. A couple of years ago, the World Bank decided that it would categorize countries according to their level of indebtedness. And half the world became candidates for what was called the HIPC initiative. HIPC means highly indebted poor country. That term ran rampant in Washington, D.C. But imagine going to Lusaka, Zambia, and saying to a citizen of that country, do you know, you are a HIPC country. You're highly indebted and you're poor. It was so degrading. You couldn't even communicate with people with pride and dignity in themselves. And final point on that one, just to say how exciting it is that you can bring that experience into a classroom or influence a system. You talk about first generation. You know, I may have fit every stereotype you could, because I didn't walk around saying, hi, I'm from Guyana. I didn't have a, people saw me and they had assumptions about me. And my mother did not have a university education. I have 3 brothers, all of whom are professors, and you know, they all did well. Where did that come from? People ask me, I mean, where did that come from? But my mother never thought of herself as, oh, I'm poor and therefore, no. That was just not a part of her thinking. The poverty didn't get into her head. It was always pushing and supporting. Little secret, I came to Macalester College because my mother went to the US Embassy to find out about, I was pro going to Britain for my education. I was going to be a young Englishman and England was the place. In the end, I thought I got the better deal because the US government gave 10 scholarships to, full ride scholarships to Guyana when we became politically independent in 1968. So I got one of those scholarships. And I thought, you know, like, you know, what am I going to do at an American university? You know, in America, you could get a degree in anything. You could get a degree in ice cream. You could get a degree. No, it's not really. I must go to Oxford or Cambridge. Well, everything that I knew, because we studied the one subject, I knew economics. Lo and behold, everything that I'd studied with my advanced level, we covered in half a semester at Macalester. I was like, whoa. And students did not have a look. In Guyana, in the British system, if you were intellectual, you wore a tie, you stood up when the professor came into the room. The first day at Macalester, I stood up when the professor came. He said, sit down, sit down. students were wearing blue jeans with shoes with holes. And I was like, no, 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 you can't. School, university, you have to be. So again, just to go back to it, there's the classroom, there's influence that you could, in fact, you don't know how you're reacting, how kids are reacting to you, how students are reacting to you. So you always have to have that. And then there's the system as a whole, trying to influence policy, direction, how things are shaped up. And I think as a career, you have that range. The fact that I had this liberal arts education gave me the ability, I think, plus my own life experience, to adapt and to change, as I'm sure as students, you'll bring that also to the career area, and you'll find your niche. And you're always teaching. I believe you never stop teaching because people are always learning. And I found my biggest thing was when I ran a program within the World Bank. How do you train, not educate, how do you get adults who all have the credentials? There's nobody in the World Bank that doesn't have a PhD or is top somebody from someplace. How do you get these people to think about some idea that they never thought about before? Because they know everything. We have the credentials, we know everything. What are you going to tell us? And any program that I ran in the World Bank, the first 2 days was sociology and anthropology. How I get these guys to open up, people to think differently. And that was very exciting. I'm going to end on this one. I went to a program in Nigeria, and we're starting the program, and a male participant came to me and said, "Excuse me, but there's a woman over there, a female. Why is she here? This is not, this is an internationally sponsored event. Why is this person here?" I said, "I tell you what you can do for me." I said, "I want you to go back to your room, pack your bags, and head to the airport, because I don't want you in this group." Guy was startled. What are you saying to me? And I said, "No, you're not ready, because that person will stay and you will go." Half an hour later, his supervisor called me. "Please, could you allow him to stay? It's a little insensitive," and so forth. At the end of the workshop, seminar, whatever we wanted to call it, he came over and he said, I did not have that perspective. I came as a Nigerian man in the position I had in my society, the two don't mix, and you're challenging me. I like that. That's a part of the education system, highest level, lowest level. I'm sure you have to deal with parents who have different points of view when you're dealing with children, and it makes the job exciting. So I'm supportive of careers in this area.
I can tell that this could be a really spicy conversation in so many different directions. And I'm so great. We can tell that you're all educators and can bring the dialogue in so many different really important conversations. A question from one of the students was, how do you vet post-grad opportunities? That first place, like how do you vet them? What do you wish you would have known? And feel free, I'm going to pose that question to Amel.
All right, thank you. All right, so yes, I definitely want to talk about that. Yes, I have thoughts, having navigated it recently and even now, right? So I think there are a lot of things I look for in terms of, you have to think about a lot of things. You have to think about like, first, right? Like, what do you want to do, in the future? What do you want to explore? It doesn't have to be like the first opportunity you get out of college, right? Does not need to be like the job that like the job. It needs to be a job that will help you gain skills to get to the next thing. Because you might be there for a year, you might be there 6 months, You might have a summer job for 3 months. My first job out of college, Kate remembers this because I was one of the people, she was one of the people I called right after I like quit this horrible summer camp job, like the summer after I graduated. And like she like counseled me through it. So, but it helped me. Like I learned actually things from that experience. I didn't see them until much later, like what they were, but I learned. So I would say, how do you vet these opportunities? Find people that have done them and talk to those people. Do not talk just to the employers. Talk to people you know who have done them. And if you're in a good bubble, like you should be able to find people that have done that. You should be able to find networks of networks of networks. Macalester will assist you with that. You won't always be able to do that, but that's helpful. And then of course, when you interview, I think, especially because you're going to be young, and yeah, you are young, like ask a lot of questions about the support that they offer. Like ask a lot of specific questions and like know already in your mind what answer you want to have from them. So if I asked places, when I was interviewing for teaching jobs in the spring, I asked, how do you support first year novice teachers? I asked like, what systems of support do you have specifically for them? And when schools were like, we have, we just support all our teachers. I knew that was kind of honestly not a very good answer because first year novice teachers need very specific support and some schools are equipped to support them and other schools are not. And I know this because I'm in a cohort of 25 and in my grad cohort, they're all at different schools across the DC metro area and very, very, very different experiences depending on what their schools do and do not offer. Also, you have to pay attention to, you have to learn to read between the lines with interview answers like that, which takes a lot of time and you won't always do it right. But you also don't want to be paranoid about it, right? Like you'll know when something looks like it might be a good fit and sometimes you'll pick something and you'll have an experience that isn't 10 out of 10, but it's still a valuable experience. So like my current school, right? They had a great answer about support. I'm the only first year teacher on staff. That's a very, very different experience for me than what a lot of my peers are experiencing because there's a high turnover in the US right now. There's usually a lot of first year teachers in your group, right? So it's interesting to see, right? Like how, they've done some great things to support me. They've also on some occasions like failed to support me, right? And that's kind of what a job is. You're always going to have that kind of like, you're never going to be like, wow, every single thing about this job, especially if you teach in a K-12 setting. Yeah, there are going to be times when you're just like, wow, I'm really disappointed. But that's kind of part of the game and you learn how to play the game. And it's worth it. So to answer your question about post-grad opportunities, yeah, like vet carefully. Also, and like pay attention to red and yellow flags, but don't freak yourself out trying to figure out what's going to be good. Just like rely on your networks, ask good questions.
I love that. Other observations from the group?
So from the hiring manager perspective, right? I mean, I'll add that. But also, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Physiological needs, safety needs. I think ML and I are on the same page. Have no shame about taking the job that's offered to you. That's not the commitment you're making for the rest of your life. If your rent is not paid, if you don't have enough money to put food on the table, there is no shame in taking whatever job, honest job, right, is available because it's not a lifelong commitment. And if anything, now from the hiring manager perspective, I have always been skeptical of people who've done nothing but that one thing, whatever that one thing is. So I have always been biased against people who knew exactly what they wanted to be at age 5 and then just pursued that path. And then guess what? Those usually happen to be the people who end up burning themselves out or not be able to bring different perspectives to the table. So there's so much value to a gap year in the sense that maybe you can't afford it. Like as an international student, I couldn't afford a gap year. I had to take the first job that was offered to me. And but you can use that as your own mini gap year. Do something that you would never think of doing and then take that job as long as it pays the bills and it gives you health insurance, right? I mean, these are some minimal non-negotiables. But please do not have shame. And I just want to say this, and I said this actually to one of the previous presidents of Macalester, and he didn't really appreciate this, I don't think. Macalester puts so much pressure on every single one of us to have meaningful lives that and to change the world around us, that is a kind of, I think, aggression almost towards students, especially students like such as myself, who came from families without means or social capital or connections, to then expect us to right from the start be the ones changing the world. That's too much psychological pressure, if not unkind entirely. So I love Macalester dearly, don't get me wrong, but don't let this institution to also pressure you into being the next person who's going to be on the cover of the alumni magazine, right? When you look at it, you can be on the cover of the alumni magazine for being that person who really took a gap year off and then exercise self-care. Like, be the poster child for doing what is right for you. It's like that oxygen mask. If you can't take care of yourself first, like you're supposed to put the oxygen mask on yourself on the plane before doing it for other people. In my experience, while I was going through Macalester, I was not taught that. And again, that could be ancient history, but it was all about, think about others, change the world. You're the change we want to see. That is too much to expect, especially of someone who's just entered their 20s. Be kind to yourself and be the person who role models being kind to yourselves for other people, because that's what we're missing in this society. We're all about like outcomes and metrics and changing everything, but be good to yourselves. Take a year off as long as you can afford to. Okay, I'm going to get down from my soapbox, but I clearly feel very passionately about this.
We love your soapbox. Absolutely. I felt like the spirits buoyed in Zoom, if that's even, I felt it. So I'm saying it happened. And I know, Özlem, you have people to pick up at daycare, so we understand when you have to go. And I'd love to just open it up for student comments or questions. I have a few more, but I just want to offer the space to you all, students.
Hi, everyone. Please do keep in touch. I'm
Thank
here.
you.
It's just an
Bye-bye.
email away. Don't be
Thank
shy.
you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Yeah. One last question from the group before we conclude. And feel free, alums, while I'm getting my question out, if you are willing to be in touch with students, if you would like, feel free to share your contact information in the chat in whatever manner you prefer. So much, here in St. Paul, as you might know, our K through 12, both in St. Paul and Minneapolis, are negotiating before a strike in the next few days. In all of the spaces of education, as everyone's kind of mentioned, there's so much dispiriting and there's so much challenge in every space. How have you, tell us where you found these spaces of hopefulness, maybe recently? That would be really great to hear.
I'm ready. I have a story for this from like 24 hours ago. So yeah, so I will be very, very real with you if you are thinking of teaching. This is like a lot of teachers are saying, like, this is the roughest year on record. Because we're coming back from, in the US at least, I imagine other places as well, because we're coming back from virtual learning, a lot of us, and we're seeing kids coming back in with lagging skills that they're supposed to have at a certain age, and also lagging challenging behaviors, a lot of challenging behaviors. And I was very surprised that challenging behaviors turned out to be one of the biggest parts of my struggle this year. And I just went on February break. We just came back today. And the week before we left for break, I told kids I would not grade their late work if they were not on task. And a few of them like screamed at me and like just like lost it. It was really awful. And I had I was like, wow. And I spent during this break, right? I spent a lot of the week just thinking like, I had a little too much time to think. I was thinking, oh my God, the normal first year teacher doubts, which I anticipated, am I good at this? Can I do this? Will I ever get better at this? Blah, blah, blah. And I happened to have a Zoom session about something totally different with a professor of mine at my grad program. And she was like, how are you? And I was like, well, like, I don't want the rest of the year to be this awful. And I'm wondering if I should just slog through it and like, just accept that it's going to be this way. And she was like, okay, what can you do right now? Like, what's going on? What's the plan? Like, you have to be able to tell yourself you did everything you could. And we came up with a plan. She made me come up with a plan in the moment. And I was like, she was like, you have to say that you tried. You need to make sure that these things work. Try doing this, this, and this. And we assembled a plan. She made me script out what I was going to say to my students when we came back from break, which was today. And I was like, maybe this will work. And she was like, you have to go in believing that they will listen to what you say and do what you say. It doesn't matter if they actually will. You need to anticipate what they might say if they don't, but you have to believe it, because if you don't look like you believe it, they will know, which is true. And I came in today and I had scripted this whole thing and I was like, okay, we're going to have a successful day. I'd stayed up incredibly late, like fixing everything that I was going to teach this week and like really cutting it down to bite size to make it accessible for them. That's another issue we're having, right? Is like students are not able right now to do the volume of work that they would have done in like a normal year. So you really just got to be okay with cutting it down. You really do. I don't care, about test scores, whatever. Give them what they need to access learning. So sorry, back to the point. I went in today, I did my speech with my first period. They were silent. This was like the first time they've been silent in forever. My first period, oh my God, no. And so it was amazing. It was like, I still had kids, I had to write like 7 detentions for that period as I anticipated I would. And I had a lot of things going on. But my kids listened to me and my kids worked really hard and like accessed the work that day and did the work. And I was like, I could do this. Like, this is going to be better. It's not, I'm going to have outbursts in the next few weeks. I'm going to have kids not do what I want. I had a kid like go to the bathroom and not come back, like things that happen in school. And you kind of have to just accept them and own them and, follow up accordingly and stay consistent. But like, I felt like there may not be a sea change. I can't save my first year teacher classroom because those are notoriously rough classrooms. But I can like make some improvements so that we are like learning every day and that when I talk, we all listen and things like that. And I just felt like maybe, I just really felt sometimes you really need to lean on positive people. And I don't mean to say that in like a toxic positivity way. Like I really mean people that are like hopeful and practical. Like there's practical hope. And then there's, we should all just be grateful for what we have. Like, don't worry about any, you know what I mean? You don't want to be there either. So I just want to express, if you have hope, your hope should be practical and actionable. And I think that's what the educators who are striking are doing, right? Like they're taking a larger action than me, like talking to my kids, but thinking about that, right? Like, how can you be practical and intentional and like act on what you need to do rather than throw up your hands? Because it's easy to throw up your hands right now and say like, I can't do this anymore. So I want to share that with you. And I hope it's not dispiriting. I'm really not trying to make it sound that way. Thanks.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I'm going to have to run in a couple of minutes. I just want to say my orientation is clearly international education and working with other cultures and people in different circumstances. And there are some opportunities when you graduate from Macalester. One, I'm sure many of you have thought about is maybe something like the Peace Corps, and there are other organizations that do the same thing. But get out there, spend some time, experience something different, see the forms of education, how other people have to do it given their circumstance. And I think it'll suit you well in terms of a future career, where you want to go, whether you want to go back to, academic education, be a professor at the higher education institution, work in a classroom, or be an administrator, manager. But that kind of experience would be something that would be useful coming out of college with your first degree. So I thank you very much, guys, for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun. got to meet great people. Are you in Washington, D.C., ML?
I am. I'm in DC.
Oh my gosh. We got to find a way of getting together. Of course.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's Alumni Connects happening. I have been like off the radar of that, but they are very
Yeah,
real.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
used to my son and I taught a course at American University where we had a lot of people from the education department. And
Oh yeah. My current grad program is at Hopkins, but it's like through this nonprofit and they're about to like change their partnership to be with American. And it seems like a really good deal. I'm excited
well,
about it.
I'm a Hopkins guy as well. So don't mind Hopkins. Anyway, thank you guys very
Connections
much.
are
I appreciate
amazing.
it. And I hope it was helpful in some small way. And please contact me. I think you have my number and so forth. Please, anything I could do in DC, I will try to help and support. Thanks a
Well,
lot.
Thank you, each of you, and
Yeah.
have a great evening. Thank you to each of the students for joining.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
students.
night. Take care, everybody.
Bye.